Tense now.
Yeah, we just had the countdown. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday session on the 13th of July 2025. Today we have Lee Fieldhouse, I affectionately call Worm Wrangler, and his dog, who's obviously...
She's going to take questions later on.
So you can see how the session's going to go already, hey? And then we have Chris Eggert, who's an organic dairy farmer. Wonderful to have you folks on here today talking about the nutrient cycles. And of course, Kevin Elmy, who is fresh back from Ukraine. Now then, I just want to touch on what Kevin's done because he's done some miles. And just in case when he's talking, he's sort of tripping over his tongue a little bit, it's probably because he's just getting his feet after being in soil pit after soil pit. Kevin, do you want to just briefly explain what you've been doing the last 3 weeks?
Well, there's a group called Travel Aid Agro out of Ukraine. The last couple of years they've been bringing different consultants from around the world and to go through, visit the some different farms across the Ukraine, dig some soil pits, and then go through what would we recommend to do for changes in these particular fields, what problems we see, and looking for potential problem or solutions to them. And then after 2.5 weeks of putting in some pretty long days, then in Western Ukraine, we had a 2-day conference where we gave a presentation. So there was over, I think, 350 or 400 people that were in attendance in the conference. So going over there, really quite jealous of a lot of the soils. They're dealing with almost a meter of topsoil, but their management is very industrial, very non-biological. So we were seeing, at least I was seeing, some significant issues. The biggest takeaway from it for myself is being exposed to some of these fairly high level consultants and researchers, and some of the people that were following our presentations online said what they saw was now, like the first couple of pits that we went through, the industrial type of consultants who were going through, and they had their very chemical recommendations. And after 3 or 4 of our meetings, all of a sudden they started talking about carbon. So if nothing else comes out of it, if I've influenced some of these consultants to get away from just the NPKs and the micronutrients and think about the carbon and then the soil biology, I would say that's been a win in its own.
Fantastic. That's it, and it's just repetition, isn't it? Really, well, it's not just, but repetition does help.
But and seeing once again, so spent a significant amount of time in Australia, now spending the time in Ukraine, along with the United States and Canada. Guess what? We all have the same problems, and it goes back to these broken cycles that we have, and whether it's water, whether it's carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, it goes back to broken symbiotic relationships between the soil biology, the plant, the soil, and our climate.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, my introduction is going to be a little bit longer today, just so that I can explain to you. We've now got to the 5th principle in context, which is increasing the nutrient cycles. So I'm just going to recap, because what I'm going to do is put a series of videos together that is titled 5 Principles in Context, because we have had such incredible people on speaking and such incredible topics that I thought it would be easier for people to access these lives. So I'm just going to go through them quickly so that you understand how much information that we've actually accumulated. So the increased biodiversity, one of the ones was From Go to Woe, and that was with Martin Williams, Russell Young, Kevin and I. And it is only on the membership channel, but because when I started all these lives, I had no idea what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to achieve, but as it has evolved, I can now actually encapsulate it all and put it all together for you into a playlist. So that was one of the increasing biodiversities. And then we had Terry McCosker on, and that was titled Perception and Perspective, because we were actually specifically talking about language. But because Terry brings in such wonderful information and his wisdom, plus the grazing aspect with the whole table of different names of grazing, and that he actually put together and very kindly shared with us. Then we move on to minimal soil disturbance. I actually called it landscape function at the time because, like I said, I was starting from ground zero. But that really does focus on, so it was the Soil Key Renovator with Niels Olsen and Kevin and I. And that really does focus on how minimal soil disturbance actually does increase your cycles within the ground. And then keeping the ground covered was with Russell Young, Rob Hetherington, Kevin and I, and we were talking about multi-species cropping in an environment of multi-species. And then a stepping stone was between the ground cover and the landscape function was infiltration. And we had Paul, the dairy farmer in Canada, with the slake tests and the infiltration tests, and of course, Kevin and I. And then we had landscape function. So we're getting closer to the day today with Stuart Andrews and Karen Jarling. Mentioned natural sequence farming and a permaculture technique, and increasing the function of their landscape so that they can hold water on the landscape higher up, and then that increases the fertility of the rest of the whole landscape as a function, and working it all together. And then today we've got increasing all the nutrient cycles with Lee Fieldhouse, Chris Eggert, Kevin and I. And so that's what we're going to move on to now. So just wanted you all to know that that's going to be a selection of videos that will all be under one playlist. And I'm now on Substack as well. So you can go and join and have a look over there. All right, sorry. We're going to just discuss this one first. So today's discussion is about restoring the cycles, and this is from my ebook, and the previous page was from my ebook as well, and it's titled Multi-Species for Beginners, or Multi-Species Farming for Beginners. So this is at a very beginner level, and that's where I started, and I'm still at. I'm moving up gradually as I'm doing all these lives and learning things. So restoring the cycles, we have, what are the cycles to start with? Water, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and then I added one because I do like biology, and it's the microbiological cycle. So hopefully today we will be discussing majority of those. If we do leave out any, we might have to have them all back and do another live. Okay, so as usual, we're going to discuss the language, and today I thought what was going to symbiotically interact with what we're discussing, and I thought prescription versus subscription. So we all know about prescription, being given a prescription for from the doctor, and so it will be, this is what you need, these are the pills you take, and you are step-by-step sequence of instructions that you take to achieve a specific goal. So that's normally given to you by an expert, or hopefully it's given to you by an expert. So prescription really is about taking orders. It's a sequence of events from A to B, and that's what you follow. Now, what I find with the prescription is the way of thinking is that at the end of the day, because somebody's told you to go from A to B in that linear fashion, you have somebody to blame at the end of the day if it doesn't go right. And so you're not actually taking accountability for your own actions. So what I do is I prefer subscription. What you're doing is you're subscribing to and volunteering an interest in somebody's beliefs or ideas. And I've got here, this is what I just put down this morning, a set of ideas or beliefs that you aspire to. This gives you freedom to experiment and play with different weights or quantities or timings, or in the case of multi-species farming, enables you to achieve a balance between the multi-species that you plant. whether it's plants or whether it's animals or microbiology, all those different things. And this means when you subscribe to an idea, you are actually accountable. So you take, you acknowledge that if you're wrong, you need to change things. And that's the whole learning side of it. All right. I told you it was going to be a long intro.
But it's a good basis of what we're talking about, because when in Ukraine, they were looking for recipes, they were looking for the prescription, and it goes back to context. It's they have to learn. What are the issues? I keep telling people, when you get into the multi-species farming, the first thing that happens is your power of observation comes back.
Yeah, very, very important. And I love the experiment and the science that's happening in the field, because if you take it to a lab, it's not going to work in the field. That's my personal opinion.
I tried to do myself a pot trial the other day, just to prove myself right about something, and it all went pear. And I stood there and looked at it and went, why? Because I shouldn't have done it. But I went and looked at what I'd done in a paddock, the same kind of thing with dressing seeds with biocast, real simple. In the pot, they all look exactly the same. In the field, the dressed and the undressed look completely different. You can never have all the parameters in a pot. So I knew not to do it, and still I did it. So,
but you still got a story at the end of the day.
yeah, it wasn't a happy one for a little while, but
Okay, so we'll move on to Chris to start with, just to get the whole foundations. Chris,
Yep.
Would you like to start with what you used to do and how? So, I mean, I'm presuming that you were a prescription dairy farmer initially, and then you saw.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Over to you.
So we used to have that was 25 years ago. We had consultants and that sort of thing, nutritionists and all that. And when I started organic farming, we still sort of tried to use those methods, I guess. So instead of putting nitrogen on, I tallied up how much nitrogen I could get out of chook manure and just use that amount of chook manure. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't until I did holistic management in 2003, I think that was 2002 maybe, that I started basically worked out that you need to subscribe rather than prescribe. So I got rid of all the consultants and whatnot and just chipped away ourselves, looking at things like what worked and looking at the soil and digging in the soil a lot, I guess. And just over the years, that's how I've sort of I'm still learning now. I still got a lot to learn, but you just see small changes in the soil and think, oh, that worked well. And a couple of years ago, this worked or that didn't work. So, we used to use compost teas and nutrient foliar sprays and all that sort of thing, like trying to grow like ryegrass and clovers and chicory. That went really well. But then in the last few years, getting into more multi-species, putting lots more different plants in has made a massive difference to the soil. So you can really, I think you can change the soil around really quickly by using multi-species plants. Yeah. So, I mean, that photo there, that picture there, that's just a little bit of multi-species that did all right, where we drilled into just a heavy Kikuyu Paspalum paddock in the summer. There's no way anyone's going to tell you that's going to work. But as you can see, it sort of worked all right. You can see what the paddock looks like in the background where the cows are, where we didn't plant anything. But I mean, to take something positive out of that picture too, like what's in the background, or the heavy grasses and weeds, we call them. I don't really like to call them weeds anymore, but that's what we need to try and mimic in our paddocks, like getting a lot of different diversity and different shaped plants and that sort of thing in our paddocks. That's what we're trying to do. You can see, it's pretty heavy. Oh, there's giant Parramatta grass there and this awful type of weed we talk about, but The other plants are growing along beside it quite nicely. Like if I spray all that Parramatta grass out, like what is recommended, like I kill everything, and we're starting from that base again. Well, zero base really. We're killing everything in the soil. So, that was in summertime. That was pretty hot there.
I think that was fairly recently after some floods that you had as well, wasn't it?
That was after the 21 floods. No, it was a couple of years after.
Okay.
Yeah, that place. But like where the cows are there in the last flood, that was all underwater, well underwater sort of thing. So it's obviously on a floodplain, but that's just around an old turkey's nest there that we had. But it just shows that but there was no preparation, no mulching or anything of that paddock. We just drilled that into that kaikui, and it did all right. But the thing is, like the next year when you plant something in it goes even better. Like it seems to build on itself. So it just gives you more confidence, I guess, like to move on, because if you go to the shop or talk to too many people at a sale or something like that, like you're just going to get too many naysayers, and you know what I mean? You're not going to do it, sort of thing. But when you do these different types of things, like you got to prepare to fail too. Like I try not to expect too much, and but when you get like good results in that, it's pretty cool. Like being down in the paddock by yourself, celebrating or whatever. I don't know. But,
have you found your profit margin increasing since you started this?
There's sort of other factors involved in like the farming at the moment, but it's definitely good to I guess we're going okay. You know what I mean? Like we don't feed much grain to our cows anymore. Like we only feed like a kilo to half a kilo to a kilo of grain just to keep them happy while we're milking them. And we haven't bought any hay in for quite a few years. So the multi-species cropping has helped us grow like a lot of silage. As well. So like when we have floods and droughts, we've obviously got feed for the cows, and we can keep decent rotations, like length of rotations in the rest of the farm by feeding that grass that we've conserved.
How big's the farm, Chris?
How big?
Yeah.
It's about 250 acres, something like that. Yeah. That we farm.
And how big's your herd?
At the moment, it's about 180 cows. Yeah.
Okay.
So we go from, like a month ago, I was only milking about 130 cows. So, but sometimes I can milk up to 240. Yeah. So it just depends. Like because of the floods and that, you got rid of quite a few cows and that sort of thing. Yeah. But now, like the herd, I've got fresh cows coming in now. So,
and you only milk once a day, is that correct?
Yeah, we milk once a day, and that's made a massive difference too, because like we can conserve silage when we need to, and we can plant paddocks when we need to. It's all about timing. So, like if we have we go into a dry spell now, and all of a sudden, like the forecast pops up, it's going to rain in 2 weeks potentially. Like it's a really, we can start like planning for that and planting paddocks and that sort of thing. Like whereas before, if I was milking in the morning and the afternoons, like I'd have to stop doing what I'm doing, like and go and milk the cows. But now I can just plant. You know what I mean? Or we found we've got silage in just before it started raining. Like it's just all about timing, like and it just gives us more time to focus on the pastures and the soils rather than just having just milking the cows. Yeah.
So how are your cows just being milked once a day? So does that mean that they're producing less milk, or is it just better quality milk because of the multi-species? Therefore, it doesn't matter.
I think it definitely, like when you're in a multi-species, the fat and protein seems to go up in the milk, and the cow's just pretty happy and calm and that sort of stuff. Yeah, there is like I guess a small like drop in production, but it's hard to quantify because it's so like holistic. Like we're feeding less grain as well, and that sort of thing. But definitely, like when we first started, like the condition of the cows was better quickly. Like I think it's underestimated how much taxing is on the cows, bringing them to and from the dairy yard twice a day with walking and that sort of thing. So, and also like in summer and that sort of thing, I can hold I've got like a big sort of open shed that I put mulch in that the cows can just stay and loaf in there. Well, we might put some silage in there. Like that'd probably be like they've come down in the afternoon there. It's probably about 2 or 3 o'clock. So they don't have to graze in the heat because I've got to milk them at 3 o'clock. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just gives us more flexibility in our farming, which I guess reduces stress.
And then you do something novel as well when you're milking in that area. You don't just hose it out, do you?
No. So like like where the cows are grazing there now, like it's probably, if I had a paddock like that, it's not the greatest, milking, but I can cut that and bale it and put it on the yard, like as my carbon source, and then the cows will pee and poo on it, whatnot, and then we scrape that up and make compost out of it, and then we can put it on the paddocks, back on the paddock. So we're recycling our nutrients. But when we cut that, so where the cows are standing there now, we can cut that, and then we can direct drill straight in, like a multi-species crop, straight into that. And that's so I suppose we're getting, multiple uses out of like that older grass, like you can see in the picture there. So yeah, it saves a lot of water. It's comfortable for the cows, and saves a lot of time too, like hosing off and that sort of thing. So, and having to deal with all that smelly effluent, liquid effluent. So it gives us something we can pick up, move, and we can take to each end of the farm. Like we can, cart it in a spreader to the furthest place on the farm, rather than putting a lot of nutrients just close to the dairy yard. Yeah.
I've just paused the video there because in the top right corner, you can see like a funny line with blocks underneath. That's actually a railway line.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
and where does the flood come up to?
Well, the biggest flood I'd sort of seen was 4 years ago, when it went like it pretty much lapped the bottom of that track. So, and then the one we just had a couple of months ago, it probably went a quarter of the way up those pylons, you can see. Yeah, so it wasn't as big, but the farm definitely floods, and it gets all covered in water, sort of thing. But the same thing, the more grass I have on the farm, even though it mightn't be as high quality for like protein, like getting milk out of the cows and that, the quicker it's going to recover, I think. If it's short, just short ryegrass or whatever, like it's going to take longer to recover than having like multi-species in there with different things. Like I still like saw vetch and cowpeas still growing after they were covered in water. Mm-hmm. Like I thought they'd die, but they've sort of like recovered a bit. You know what I mean? And just, that means that plant's growing and there's more diversity in the soil and whatnot for when things come good. Yeah.
So you're finding, because of the multi-species farming, it's actually less anaerobic after a flood like that, because that's where most people would be suffering, isn't it? They'd end up with compaction and the soil.
Yeah. I was surprised, the worms and that still in there. And also, like, because it's been really wet, what we're doing to plant in the autumn, we're like mowing the paddocks, and then we're just raking the windrows into like just really big windrows, and just leaving them in the paddock and planting in between the windrows. And wherever the windrows are, like there's just so many worms in there, like it was like a safe haven for them to go to or something. I don't know, like because they could, get out of the water more. It was like having little bales of hay all stuck next to each other in rows. So I guess, they go there and then they can come back out of there as well. So even though like it's not a living plant, like the the mulch in the paddocks that's left there, like it's still diversity, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's still like got insects in there, spiders and all that sort of thing. So it's a place for them to go, yeah.
And now that we're talking about worms, Lee, fantastic timing for you to come in on the conversation. How did you and Chris meet? Was it to do with worms?
Actually, one day I went to Chris's place. He doesn't know. He wasn't home. I just popped in. No, I went with a land care group a long time ago. Was really impressed by the composting that was going on. But the time we actually met was one of those prescription things we were talking about. So the milk company, who will remain nameless, was trying to get a heap of their guys to go organic. So they had a consultant up from Victoria. And so just talking about not changing the game, changing the shape of the ball. What inputs can I use for phosphorus? What can I do for this? What can I do for that?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he very nearly got buried in Chris's compost heap. So, for example, he tried to do a nutrient budget on Chris's compost.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to have this much P and this much N, and so that means it's going to cost this much. And I said to him, you'd gone home. This was the second time when we were all at the club. You'd gone home. And I said to him, mate, do you understand compost? Like, why are you doing a nutrient budget on compost? You're an idiot. I think I was home at that point as well. But yeah, it was an absolute schmozzle in that all they were doing was just trying to change what inputs can I use here? What can I replace what I'm doing now with something else? And you said something interesting before you marched out. You said no one will go any good until you go organic in your head. And I took that away. I went, that's exactly what we need. We actually need to change the whole thought process.
Yeah.
Into Chris has been.
Is that an alarm going off, Chris?
Yeah, Billy just burnt the sausages, I think.
That thing about having to change this whole space about the way we review all those processes. So, Chris standing there looking at that grass saying, okay, it's not great grazing grass, but I can bale this and it can become compost, or this grass is going to stop the flood ripping my place up. It's that whole change of the way we view that landscape. The plant itself, it has a function well beyond what beyond grazing. Like, there's a whole function in that. Tamzin, can you just chuck up, while we're talking about function, can you just go to that video where you've got the grazed paddock in it?
Yep.
Right, so that you look at that, someone might say that's a waste, all that material laying on the ground, or that thing's too tall or whatever, but the function created by that plant residue, Chris touched on it with his windrow stuff, there's so much material going into the cycle at that point. You could never buy enough mulch to mulch a paddock that heavily. It's an incredible thing. And to me, that's why your worms are so massively and prolific. So worm, being a detritivore, needs something to eat. So all of this stuff that's getting broken down by other microbes and springtails and slaters and stuff is making worm food. So on Tuesday, as a bit of a day out with the kids, we went and dug worms for a Western Sydney Uni carbon project. And when I contacted the guy afterwards, I said, look, the actual learning from this was the digging the worms, not what you think you're going to gain by having worms in your fish tank or whatever the thing is. Come and look at the environment that these worms came from. Now, I've got one little patch of Ceteria outside the greenhouse that it's too big to mow. So I, swear at it and don't do anything with it. But underneath all that litter was absolutely full of worms. Take 2 steps further away into the short grass section of around there, and there's nothing. But there's nothing for them to do. There's nothing going into the cycle. So if you look at that compared to a boring old kikuyu paddock or ryegrass paddock, there's all this woody stuff. There's these sunflower stalks. There's all this heavy material that's going to break down for ages and ages. It's going to add so much more than the fairy floss of kikuyu or ryegrass can ever put back into that cycle.
Yeah.
So I've got to make a video for my mate at the uni just to say, look, actually look at this. Don't the worms might help your soil increase carbon, but the whole environment is what's creating, firstly, a conducive environment for worms, and secondly, the worms are creating a conducive environment for everything else. It's all joined together. You can't just have this bit. They'll help. They're huge and massive help in all settings, but let's look bigger. Let's get bigger and bigger. Anyway, I probably won't get invited to the Christmas party. That doesn't really matter. So yeah, Chris and I met that. You're not going either, right? Chris and I started talking, I think, on that day and started doing a bit of stuff with dressing seeds.
Yeah, well, obviously, like I don't plant without dressing the seeds with a least vermicast, so liquid vermicast. So yeah, it's just religious here. That's what we do. We put that on the seeds to get it into the ground, and I think that's the difference. So that paddock we just looked at, like you might think, oh, I must have ploughed it up and planted it, but I didn't. That was just cooch, kikuyu, paspalum. There might have been some chicory and clovers and that sort of thing in there as well. But we've just like drilled straight into that with the those summer plants. And you think, oh, they're not doing so well, the other stuff's going to outcompete them. But then I think because of the vermicast, the plants can get up. Once they get up a level with the kikuyu and those shorter summer plants, they take off. And then what you dig underneath, like look underneath the canopy, and the cooch and the kike, it's all going brown. And the like worms, and you can see like there's like the diggings from the worms are up above those plants. Like they're actually like turning that stuff into soil, those plants underneath.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it feeds off. And then those plants that are on the ground there in the autumn, the ryegrass and the oats and that sort of thing, they're feeding off that. They're feeding off that lab and the sorghum and millet and whatnot's in there. So, yeah, and that's like, it's not a bad problem to have, but that's a problem like with the soil. Once it becomes really healthy and you get all these worms and that, you got to keep feeding them. You know what I mean?
How do you think I feel every day, Chris? Always hungry mouths to feed.
Yeah, the soil gets hungry. You know what I mean? Like.
But at that day at yours, Chris, that Tamzin came to, someone made a really interesting point in that this is coastal floodplain or river flat country. In the past, this would have been a forest or a brush of some kind.
Yeah,
it's been a high cycling soil in the past, and we've reduced it to kikuyu monoculture. There's nothing going back into that cycle. So whatever carbon it had the day it got cut down and burnt, it's only ever reduced from there. But by doing this, what we're creating a functional diversity that is mimicking that cycling all over again on these hungry soils. So you're coming back to, okay, it's not the same, but you're creating that same function that it would have had in the past, just chewing up all that material through the cycle. I think it's the only way forward as far as I can tell. Otherwise, we're just reducing stuff all the time. But Tamzin, can you go to that photo of Chris posing in the paddock with a spade?
Awesome.
This one to me, this was what our next field day was going to be on, but it rained persistently. That's summer and winter all together. That was in April that Chris is standing there. But when did you plant that?
1st of March.
Right.
Planted it.
So too late for summer, too early for winter.
Yeah.
And look at it. It all grew exactly the same height as each other.
Yeah.
Like, what season? Who cares? We don't do seasons anymore. Let's just go for it. And that to me, that's as far as thinking goes, that's a complete game changer.
Well, I took a couple of photos yesterday actually of like sunflowers.
Yeah,
Like it's the middle of winter, and there's a
Yeah.
full sunflowers in the paddock still.
unreal.
Yeah, and like buckwheat as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're looking a bit sad because it had a little bit of frost and that, but yeah, so it just goes to show if you put it in there, like it can grow. But yeah, unfortunately, that paddock got covered in water. It doesn't quite look the same now, but it's like I say, it's still recovering pretty well. Like, and the organic matter didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
You know, it's still there, so there's still food and that sort of thing. Whereas, like before, the way we used to farm, like before we were organic, was like plough. We plough it all the time. Rotary hoe. When we plant corn for silage, like if you couldn't see the urea on the ground from the tractor seat, like weren't putting it on thick enough, you know what I mean? And the potassium chloride and that sort of stuff too, potash, we called it. We used to just like put that on there and lots of single super and MAP and DAP and all that stuff. But when I see that stuff in bags now, I look at it like they got crossbones on them, you know, like it's poison sort of thing. So, but it's just, you see it, it's still like just flying out the door, eh? Like when you go to the produce stores and that, like people are desperate to grow some grass now. I think that's, you know, maybe it works for them, I don't know. Like, that's not really my concern anymore, I suppose. Yeah.
Kevin, I would love your thoughts now that you've heard a little bit of history about Lee and Chris's relationship and what's been going on the farm. What are your thoughts then?
Yeah, they absolutely nailing it. You're living the dream. You've definitely turned the corner. You're checking all the boxes, and you know the whole thing of you know the trampling and wasting that plant material. Jay Fear from the Medican Farms in Bismarck, North Dakota, he actually did feed tests of the top half of the plant and the bottom half of the plant. And the best thing we could be doing with the bottom half of the plant is trampling it. All of our feed issues are in the bottom half. Nutrition's in the top half. The multi-species, you have a green plant, the plant's fixed dirt. In the 28 soil pits that we visited, we counted 3 earthworms.
Whoa.
3 earthworms out of 28 pits. And I don't know why. Monoculture, high fungicide use, high insecticide, high fertilizer, plowing 30 centimeters once, if not twice a year, deep rip. Yeah, we're destroying the homes for any potential earthworms.
What would they do if they were there, Kev? There'd be nothing to do. There'd be nothing to eat. There's no party on. There's nothing. So it'd be a lonely old place. Chris's, the worms that day, there's a photo of my young fellow with a handful of worms there. They're not little worms coming out of a shovel full of Chris's. And there'd be 20, 30 more. You can't imagine there's enough room in it, but you look through the structure of that soil and it's like Swiss cheese. It's completely open and porous, and they're doing all that for free, basically. All Chris got to do is be nice to them, sing to them occasionally. Yeah, but there's I can't really look at it any other way. They're there because there is something to do. There is a conducive environment for them to be in. If you create a conducive environment, they'll turn up and they'll create more conducive environment. So completely underrated as I would say, a default measurement of soil biology and function and health is just a worm count. They can't be there without adequate biology. Essentially, worms, these big worms are mostly eating protozoa as their main protein source. If you don't have that, you can't have the worms. And then by being there, all of the tunnels that they create, they line with organic material to farm protozoa off the inside of. So again, making more environment for more protozoa and more worms. Well, that sounds like a cycle. Amazing. That I see so many places that can't have that because they don't have anything for these poor unemployed worms to do. That's the gist of it.
Well,
Get
that's where the Jenna experiments in Germany. I sent the link to Tamzin. One of the things they found was so they had low diversity, medium diversity, large diversity, and a couple of years ago there was a major flood there, and basically the ones that survived, the more diversity, the better it survived. It just goes back to nutrient cycling, having the and whereas in Ukraine, what the stuff we were seeing, the diversity wasn't there, the aggregation wasn't there, the worms weren't there, and then people were asking, why am I always sniffing the soil? So I'd grab the soil aggregates and I would sniff it, and I said, well, you smell it, and what do you smell? And they said nothing. I said, exactly, we want to have this smell, and that's your first indication that okay, we do have a live soil. And then it is looking for earthworms. It is looking for those keys, those measures of soil health.
Yeah, we don't get out with the spade enough, Kev.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Kevin, can we discuss some of your photos because they're pretty impressive, please?
Absolutely. Fire.
Okay,
put them
I'll
up
put
and
them
we'll
up
have a chat. So this is from Western Australia at Haggerty's. And once again, 95% sand, 1% organic matter. And how do they get this rhizosheath developed? And it is the vermicast, it's compost extracts, it is some kelp and humates. So we are feeding the soil. We're feeding the microbes in the soil. The plant senses that vermicast and it produces more roots. And as it has more roots and it has a healthy, good start, it's going to photosynthesize more. It's going to have more root exudate. It's going to feed more soil biology. What a beautiful cycle. And so this is where, when we're talking about these nutrient cycles, so having these plants, it's it's increasing our micro water cycle. It's capturing carbon, so it's increasing our carbon cycle. Because we aren't putting a whole bunch of synthetics down, now we have the soil biology saying, oh, this plant is calling for nitrogen, so we have to activate our free living nitrogen fixers. Our phosphate solubilizers are activated because we don't have this excess MAP and DAP sitting in the soil. So now the phosphate solubilizers start kicking in. We don't have the sulfur fertilizer sitting there in excess. So now we have the sulfur bacteria start kicking. So it's a whole biological system that is developing. And, you see something like that. Well, you can't do that on sand. Well, right there, they're doing it.
So can I just ask, all of those cycles are happening in that rhizosphere?
Yes.
Wow.
When we have something that's broken, all of a sudden the chain of events start falling apart. So we lose the water cycle. Okay, so now that plant is, the brick starts dropping, so now it's going to not photosynthesize it at the rate it should. So that means it's not going to have the root exudate, which is going to help feed the mycorrhizae, and it's not going to grow as fast, so it doesn't stimulate the nitrogen fixing microbes. Beautiful system, absolutely beautiful. Nature's intelligence, once again, it's great.
And so we'll go a little bit deeper with the next photo.
So I was blessed to spend a couple of days with Dr. James White, and his career is based on this rhizophagy cycle, which once again was first developed or understood in Australia. So rhizophagy, you break it down, rhizo is root, phagy is eating, and it basically describes the process of how plants the preferential nutrient uptake is. And this is how through the process of the roots eating the microbes in the soil, stripping off the cell walls, consuming the cytoplasm, taking the nuclei of that microbe, cycling it within the plant cell, duplicating it, and then spitting it back into the soil, giving it some root exudate to then stimulate producing a cell wall around that microbe to go back doing their microbe thing. Beautiful, once again, beautiful way it works. And it once again, because we don't have the free excess nutrients sitting in the soil, that plant now is able to call out for the proper microbes to get the proper nutrition that that plant needs. Which, how is that driven? It's driven through the microwater cycle, through the oxygen cycle, through the bricks, it's all integrated, and it all comes back to the root tips of both the plant and those root hairs. And so when we are talking about, the grazing aspect, the plant species in the mixes, the different plants need different nutrients at different times. And, I keep telling people when we're talking about the cropping aspect, or even your annual forages that you're growing, we're only feeding the soil in a lot of cases only for 30 days. After 30 days, when the plant goes into reproductive and it starts producing a stem, now that plant needs all that carbon to go into the stem to produce cell walls. It doesn't have the extra to put it as a root exudate. So once that plant leaves that vegetative stage, we stop feeding the soil. So going in and doing this graze and forcing that plant to go back to being vegetative just kickstarts that cycle again to amp it up.
Can I ask another question? So when you're talking about cropping then, and you're giving them the life support of the nitrogen and all the other synthetics that we give our crops, we are breaking that cycle.
Now the plant has the excess nitrogen in its rhizosphere. Now it senses it, and now it doesn't have to call out for the microbes to go out and do the work for them. So now, whether it's free living nitrogen fixtures in the soil, whether it's the phosphate solubilizers, the plant doesn't need it. It's not going to give that carbon to those microbes to do their job, because number one, that plant now, in order to get those nutrients, it can keep that carbon for itself for growth. So now it'll take up the free excess nutrient in the soil. And then, of course, it's going to run out and it's going to say, oh, I need some. So now it has to have the root exudate. So there's going to be a gap between taking up that phosphate, for instance, and then when it runs out of that phosphate, it's going to have to re-signal for the soil biology to wake up and get me more phosphate. So that gap in there, all of a sudden, that plant is going to be under stress. It needs phosphate. It's not getting supplied. Now our photosynthetic processes start slowing down, so our bricks start dropping down, and guess what? We start getting disease. We start getting insects. We start getting problems.
Okay, so there's a double whammy there, because
it's a triple or quadruple whammy there.
Okay, I'm only on the double because of my brain. But so we're talking about the carbon breakdown because we're ploughing, for example, or tilling, but we're also breaking the carbon because we're just feeding these roots man-made fertilizer. It's then breaking down the carbon cycle that way as well, because the plant doesn't need to give off the carbon to the microbes. I didn't know that. Okay.
The ripple effect when we start looking at modern agriculture, the more we can have, and once again, a plant, when it takes up nitrate, it takes 5 steps to get to amino acid. Whereas if we have a root exudate, or the plant picks up a microbe and consumes the cytoplasm of that microbe, it already has the amino acid in it, so it goes straight to producing protein. So it's way more efficient of a system working that way than dealing with, okay, it has nitrogen, so in order to produce the protein, okay, where's the sulfur? Okay, I have to go search for this. Oh, now I'm going to have to go look for cobalt, or I'm going to have to, it has to create this factory. And every time when you're dealing with raw materials and you have to create this amino acid, for instance, it takes a lot of energy. It takes time. So where the plant, through rhizophagy, is able to take up this microbe and eat that microbe and have those amino acids already made, way more efficient.
So going back to the observation then that Lee and Chris would have seen in the paddock, is that like the yellowing of the leaves And then so that's like their trigger to actually, or sorry, not for Lee so much, but for Chris when he was in his prescription days, it was a trigger for actually applying some form of fertilizer.
That's the way we would observe it.
Yeah, so like especially with ryegrass, if it went rusty and that sort of thing, like they'd say, "Oh, just mulch it and then put more nitrogen on it to green it up again." And I do, like I was thinking about the other day. I remember like just putting so much fertilizer on paddocks in the wintertime, just trying to get them to grow. But like I had no idea at the time that it was making it worse. I knew it was making it worse, but I couldn't possibly accept that it was worse because of what the chemical fertilizers were, because like I went to uni and I did a 4-year degree in agricultural science and I was smart. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so like I thought I was, but yeah, no idea. Yeah.
Well,
So-
if you want to really
Interesting what you're saying about those plants. The photo we showed of the big multi-species crop, the video, that crop, we cut that for silage. Like we planted that in November. This one, yeah, we planted that in November, and then we cut it for silage in January. And then as soon as we cut it, we planted another multi-species straight into it. Because we cut it for silage, it was so clean, we could get the little drill in there and plant this. And that was end of April, wasn't it, Lee? That
was the 20th of April.
Yeah. So I think maybe like you said, like by planting those fresh plants in the soil, it reinvigorated it. And I like to always plant now, for some reason, when the grass is short and green. If you can plant in the short green grass, I find that the seed grows better. Like, because the other way around, they say, no, the grass has to be dead before you put the seed in because it competes for the nutrient and all that sort of stuff. I've found like if I cut or graze and then let the plant grow a little bit, just get going and then put the seed in it, like the biology in the soil is really active because that plant's growing. Like, so like you look at the kaikui root and it's all white, or the cooch root, and that's, if you can put the seed next to that, I don't really understand the science of it, but it grows better.
Yeah, it's all alive.
With obviously the worm cast on it as well. And I don't know, like if there's a communication between plants or something, because like I think the more plants you put in, the more seeds you put in, they're like all trying to out-compete each other to grow. So it makes them grow faster. Would that be right?
Mycorrhizae fungi.
Yeah.
Mycorrhizae fungi.
Yeah.
It's all talking to each other. Chris, this paddock here, what I found really interesting, that one and the one further up, but there's no less kikuyu in that paddock than if it had just been a straight kikuyu paddock.
Yeah.
There's just more other stuff as well. Like the kikuyu is up to your thigh anyway. So, there's still, it's just adding and adding and adding and adding. There's nothing's been taken away to have extra things in there. And that more plus more equals more to the power of 10. Like it's just stacking on top of, filling everything. It's, that was a real take home for me, that kikuyu is pretty vigorous. And the fact that it's just as much in there as it ever would have been, I was like, ooh, okay. But that's another one about, you can't do that. You can't plant multi into kikuyu. Well,
yeah.
But,
and also like there's all these other benefits that come with that. So you can graze those paddocks when it's a bit wet.
Yeah.
Because the kikuyu is buffering the cows trampling or you're driving on it or whatever, you know what I mean? You're not damaging the soil quite as much. Like, so it's giving you more options. And what I've also found is that the kikuyu seems to be more palatable to the cattle when there's other stuff growing with it. Like we're in the middle of July now, and the floods have the water's receded, and the kikuyu in our paddocks is green, and I'm grateful to have it. Like at the moment, do you know what I mean? There's a bit of other stuff growing with it, but like feeding dry cows and heifers and that sort of thing on it, and they're doing. I'm surprised how well they're doing. Like, I don't know
if you
if
want a neat experiment, do a strip. Doesn't have to be very wide, but if you fertilize a strip of your forage with nitrogen fertilizer, and then kick the cows out and watch where they graze, they'll graze where you nitrogen last.
Yeah, well, I can't do that because I'm organic, but we have chooks as well, and so we're like we rotate the chooks. I know when the cows go in there, they won't eat that area where the chooks have been. It must be too much nitrogen. They won't eat it until maybe like 90 days after the chooks go out. They'll eat it. I mean, if there's nothing else to eat, they'll eat it. But if it's not a preference for them at all. Yeah.
Do you have a refractometer?
No.
I'll bring mine up next time, Chris.
If you check that area, your Brix is going to be lower than where you don't have excess nitrogen.
Yeah.
We actually, you didn't know this, Chris, but I had someone doing bricks on the day that we were wandering around in your paddock. Just quietly on the side. Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It was getting late in the season and all that stuff, and it was rocking pretty high, everything. So it was all pretty even. That was the interesting thing. Like, it seemed to bring everything up. Like, ryegrass is a shocker. I was saying rye at half, right? Yours was, I don't know, 12 or 14 or something like that. So yeah, but everything was level. That was the real interesting bit. It was really even. So rye fairy floss. I hate this stuff. I reckon it's useless.
It's good when it's good.
Yeah. We're at yours one day when we let the cows into a paddock, and you were saying that, like, if it was ryegrass and nitrogen, they would have walked up and down the paddock.
They used to do it all the time.
Yeah,
it used to frustrate my dad. I remember, like, all this feed from them, they won't eat it. I don't know.
Yeah, there was one cow in there eating the dockweed. I remember saying to you, look, that one's straight into the dock, but he said, oh, look at it, it's not. It's a little bit crook, like it's got a dirty bum and it's looking a bit ribby. It's medicating itself off something. I noticed that at home. The wallabies eat the dockweed before they eat anything else.
Well, I noticed. Remember, I showed that picture that in the multi-species of the insects eating the dockweed.
Yeah.
Couldn't. Just they weren't touching anything else. They were just eating that dock. So
the mystery of it all.
We just got a question, Chris. Do you do one pass with the chooks? How do you graze them?
Oh, I would just rotate them around, like probably don't get back. Yeah, probably to the same area within a year, maybe. But we're getting out of the chooks now, so I've got to focus on this dairy farming a bit more and that sort of thing. We've been doing pigs and chooks and all this other crazy stuff, but it's just I've come to the realisation that it's too much. I need to focus on back on the cows a bit more. But they were a good learning curve. We did it for about 15 years, but we're just going to keep a couple of hundred now. So
you have time to go fishing.
No, we've got more time to grow multi-species crops. That's what I want to do.
I'll go fishing for you.
Yeah. Can the photo with the tape measure, Lee? Yeah. Can you just talk about that, please?
This was part of my failed pot experiment. But essentially that is always what I want to see. Like, you've only just popped the top out, so there's like 30, nearly 40 mil of top, and there's 100 mil of bottom, and I reckon that's the right way around for a plant to start. To me, you're just getting yourself away from trouble. Like, that photo of Haggerty's is the perfect example. That who knows what will happen next in the season, but if you've got a root zone first, you're getting yourself out of the layer that's going to dry out quickest. You're just increasing the potential for that plant to go okay. And interestingly, the rhizo sheaths on that's in gravel, in river sand. Like, I tried to be as scientific as I possibly could and make the medium fairly inert and all that stuff. But, don't bother with that. But yeah, the fact that it's managed to produce rhizosheath off gravel, I was pretty impressed with that actually. But yeah, that's the right way up for it to go, as far as I'm concerned. And if you flick through another one, Tamzin, there's a right that's me trying to repair the flood damage. So once you start, that's not much of a plant, but it's got a heap of holding power through what it can peg together. And all that you can see in the background arrived in May. That's currently dirt. Here's the plant turning it back to soil. So we're putting it's a bit of life back in it. I was pretty happy with how they did plant it in the middle of winter into mud. Yeah, it's alive again, or becoming alive.
I do have a slide that Kevin's got. I think it's the Walter Yanni one. Let me just find that, because it's discussing exactly what you just said.
Yeah. We had a couple of days with Walter in January, and he doing a couple of videos that may or may not ever come out, but he described this really, really well. That if a plant grew in a desert in Australia, its root to shoot ratio might be 50-1 in favour of roots. Right, that's all its power to not die is held there, and we go and do dumb stuff, and we do. It's called harvest index. How much of that plant is harvestable for grain, whatever the thing is. So we just ignore this bottom bit because it's just stopping the plant falling over, and that's all it's for, right? So we reverse the ratio basically and try and go 50 up and 0 down, and then we got to prop the bloody thing up. We've got to feed it, sing to it, and all that stuff that it didn't need when its ratio was the other way. And yeah, that was a real thought process for me to concentrate on the roots. We need the roots more than we need the top.
What's also happened is genetically modifying the plant to be shorter.
That's what I mean. Like, we're selecting all the time for the harvestable portion, not for anything it might give back.
Now, this is interesting because this was actually a slide that Kevin gave me, but were you actually present at this conference then, Lee?
No.
Okay.
We went and saw Walt down in Canberra. For me and Yowie went and filmed some content.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Kevin, this slide is from Ian and Di Haggerty's side of the world, is it, in WA?
Naturally.
Yeah, where that was when they were in Western Canada. They had this slide, and it just it just resonates on so many different levels for us. Yeah,
because I always thought that however high the plant is, that's how long the roots are. But in actual fact, if you give the roots a chance, they're going to be a lot deeper.
I think we don't have any idea of the potential yet. Well, no one looks at it. Interesting. We did holistic management, and Brian said to us, draw a plant. We all draw our nice plant and so on. No one ever draws the roots. I was real proud of my daughter at the time. She was 3. Every time she drew plants, she drew the roots as well, and usually a invertebrate in there somewhere as well. I thought, that's great observation, but we never look at them. That's why, we lose the understanding because we don't ever see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And our focus, especially as adults, that's so beautiful, that story with the child's mind, because it's limitless.
Yeah.
And we need to go back to being children, just a bit more.
That'd be great.
mature.
No responsibilities, just hanging out all the time. Get fed. Yeah, it'd be perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
Kevin, with the multi-species and the fungi and the nitrogen module, we'll just keep talking a little bit more about the cycles. I've really and thoroughly enjoyed this morning. We'll just get back on topic a little bit more. Which slide shall I go to? The fungi in the soil? This one.
So this is the scale that, there's 2 places where the magic happens. We need the chlorophyll above ground to drive the machine, and where the nutrient cycling occurs, where the carbon cycling occurs, is right in this zone. So you can see the root coming out, and you can see all the white coming out of that. And so, is it saprophytic fungi? Is it mycorrhizal? I don't care. Our soils are so deficient in fungi, and that is reflected back into our carbon deficiencies, which then drives our water deficiencies, which then, it's this is where it happens. And like you said, draw the plant and draw the ideal plant. And, everybody's going to be, we want to have relatively short, and we want to have lots of green on top. And this is that harvest that we're talking about. Now, finally, some of the plant breeders are actually looking at the root systems, and they're trying to produce, a bigger root system to support more green production. And when we look at, once again, our soils, so when you're saying that, prior to agricultural purpose for your land, it was probably shrubs and bush. Well, if you look at the Elaine Ingham model of the fungal to bacteria ratio, so we've taken it from a 2-to-1 fungal to bacteria ratio, and under tillage and synthetic input, we're down to 0.3. That's a huge change in where we are in plant ecology or plant succession, soil succession. We need this fungi in our soil.
Absolutely.
And when we get the fungi functioning, then all of a sudden all these different functions start coming back.
Absolutely. Okay, but my question for you for today, in our breeding of plants, have we now bred plants that have no ability to form mycorrhizal associations? Right. So there's a lovely graphic, I should have included it, that the emerging seed needs to send a signal to the mycorrhizal spore to have it sporulate, to have it form hyphae, and then the hyphae sends a very complicated signal back, so to enable the plant to be colonized. Otherwise, the plant will treat it as an intrusion, right? So, have we, in our breeding, I question whether some of those modern things would even have this ability to form this association anymore. They've been bred so far into fert world that, is it still possible?
What they found is more the lines of a selection due to fertility. So if you look at things like black beans have been selected on black summerfullow for 100 years, 150 years. So we've selected the black beans varieties that we're using now not to respond to rhizobium because it forgot how to talk to rhizobium. In through the United States, if you travel through and the plants are under stress, there's a good field right beside a poor field, and they did some quick studies on that, and what they found was the good species, or the good varieties, were more mycorrhizal friendly than the other ones. And is it due to breeding, or is it due to our mycorrhizae they've gone dormant? They've gone to survival mode, and they just don't want to wake up because we don't give them the signal, like what you said.
I guess like the worm as well. If there's nothing for that mycorrhizal to do, why is it going to bother? So, but then, if it's not being awakened by their signal, then it's just going to sit there for, well, hopefully till someone comes along with a better idea and starts growing something that it might like. But I really question that, whether there's a lot of, you can get a mycorrhizal inoculate and so on. And in my opinion, it's like buying me beers. If I won't drink them, they're just going to stack up on the bar if I'm not receptive to drinking that beer. You can put all the spores on that you want. If there's no ability, there's no signaling, it's just going to sit there and do nothing. Yeah. So, I've questioned that a bit. It may or may not be popular. Never mind. Is that a photo from Phil Lee, Kevin?
No, that was mine. I have a little handheld microscope that I take to the field. It's actually from Ukraine.
Yeah.
it's actually a nice little telescope, microscope that take pictures through Bluetooth through your phone, and I've been impressed.
Cool.
That's funny. Cool.
So this is in one of the soil pits in Ukraine, and so they dug the soil pit, and that morning there was a little drizzle of rain, and this is the power of that water cycle. So with corn plants, the leaves are fairly upright when it's in the bed, or just starting into the reproductive stage. And once again, nature's intelligence is great because they're cupped up, rain falls, and it all funnels that rain down the stem into the roots, and then the water then follows the roots. And we thought, okay, so it hits the soil. Okay, now it's in the soil. But this is a great picture because between the plant soaking up extra water and the rain following down the stem, hitting the root, and then it follows the root down along its root, the length of the root, and now it gets to hydrate that soil right around the root. And the important part of that is, okay, so the plant is soaking up water, so it's going to have more turgor pressure, it's going to have more water, so that's going to fire off more photosynthesis. That's going to create the potential for more root exudate. Because that rainwater followed the root and hydrated that zone around the root that you can see that's sticking out of the soil around that circle, where the microbes. The microbes are right around that root. So now those microbes are going to have water. Now they're going to have some root exudate. Now that plant is going to be fed even more nutrients. If we have a rhizosheath, if we have a live mycorrhizae, if we have all that biological process, if we have a mineral soil with a bunch of chemical inputs, well, okay, now those nutrients might move around a little more, but it basically gives that plant the potential to feed that soil biology. And there's little nitrogen factories. The keys to once again, I'm cheap. So when I found out that there's all this free nitrogen in the atmosphere and we can get it free if we use some legumes, I started using more legumes in my mixes. But to have all these nice nodules is one thing, but are they active? And so once again, in Ukraine, we were in some soybean fields. I popped some of these nodules open, and guess what? They were gray. So they had nodules, but they weren't active. This is what we want to see. So when we pop these nodules open, we want them to see this dark salmon color. This shows us that our leg hemoglobin is active. It is actively fixing nitrogen. That means we have enough phosphate coming into the plant. That phosphate through the ATP ADP cycle is breaking the dinitrogen bonds from the air. It is then able to move that into the plant in a usable form to then produce amino acids, proteins, and the other good things that nitrogen involved with. So it's, we need the nodules, but we need to make sure that we're going out and we're checking to see if they're active. If they're not active, what are the issues? Is there a fresh flux of nitrogen in the soil so it's not needed? Have we fertilized it? Are we short of some micronutrients that are crucial for the function of these nodules? Yes, we can make this work, and this is part of, once again, that nitrogen cycle. Once we get the nitrogen cycle, if that's the limiting factor for some of these other cycles, okay, so now we get these other cycles to work at a higher level.
So these legumes naturally produce these nodules, whether they're being used or not. Is that correct?
If we have the right rhizobium in the rhizosphere for that legume, and if that plant, because to have that nodule, it takes a third of the plant's energy to keep that nodule going. So if we go into an area like where those chooks were, and nothing was really growing for 90 days, maybe it's because that nitrogen was too high. So that legume plant now can just use the free nitrogen from the soil instead of having this nodule to provide that nitrogen for that plant. So the nodule indicates that the soil nitrogen is low in the lower side and lower than what that plant needs. So that plant then calls out to get that rhizobium to create that nodule. If the nitrogen's high, the plant says, I'll use the free stuff first, thanks. Then when the nitrogen levels start dropping in the soil, then it recalls out for the bacteria to then set up that that nodule for the fixing nitrogen. It's simple. It's just complicated. Or complex, sorry. Not complicated. We make it complicated. I remember that. I'm sorry.
That's the one. Slap your wrist. Well, folks, we have got to 1 hour and 15. And is there anything else? Have we discussed? Let's go and do the checklist of the cycles. Have we touched? And I have to say, we haven't really mentioned carbon as much as usual, have we? Because we're always a bit biased towards carbon, as in a positive bias.
Oh, look,
And that's
we have everything we mentioned is about carbon because it's all joined
Yep.
together. Look, it's again another, in my opinion, default measurement to say, yeah, actually, you're doing all right here. You're doing an all right job. So,
Yeah, that's it. Not to actually specifically focus on carbon, just get the whole regeneration thing happening.
yeah.
And the multi-species. Chris, would you like to add anything else, especially about your farm?
Yeah, I've got to go back to work.
Okay. I had a feeling that was your alarm.
No, yeah, got to go. Thanks for having me, though.
That's a pleasure. If you want to log off, you feel free. You know how to do it. I think it is. Where is it, Kevin? Top right or something?
Top right.
Oh, it says leave. Yeah. Thanks. It was nice to meet you both, and it was great to hear that stuff you talked about, Kevin. Yeah, really good.
Keep up the good work.
I'm going to go down and dig a few holes now and see what I can see.
Yeah, fantastic,
Awesome.
Chris. Thank you. And
See
for
you,
anybody
bud.
coming to the
See you,
multi-species farming conferences, Chris will be a dinner speaker at one of them. So that's all good. You can actually meet him in person, and hopefully his son as well. What's your son called?
Oh, this one. Oh,
The one that's doing his own farm and milking.
Jimmy. Yeah,
Jimmy. That's it.
He's bottling milk at the moment, so
Yeah, he's doing really well with his little business enterprise.
Yep. No, I'll get a haircut and have a shave and all that. Put a bit of deodorant on and off I go.
Thanks,
Right.
Chris. Amazing.
Cheers, bye.
Yeah, Chris, take it easy, mate.
All right. So the three of us can just wrap it up. Once Chris has found that button, that's it. Fantastic. Okay. And so the biological cycle as well, Lee, with your worms, anything specific that you want to add?
Just look after them. Farm like they're the most important thing on your farm, and the other stuff will work out. But Chris said the first time I met him that he considered what was happening with these microbes for every action he took on that farm. So, if it's too wet and I graze it, what will I do to the fungi? If it's, so if we farm with these other organisms as a primary concern, the farm will run better, right? And it's not to say that we're going to get it right every time, but it's like upsetting my wife. If I know I'm going to do it and I buy some flowers preemptively, I'll get away with a lot more. So if we have to do something that's a negative action, just got to, you got to make up for it a bit. Be it, more seeds or allowing it to recover longer, or a lovely liquid biostimulant or something that is negating some of the negative effect of what's happened. But if we farmed with the other organisms in mind, it'd all go a lot easier.
And so how do people start then if they go, you know what, that's exactly what I'm going to do? What's the first thing to do?
Get your little racing spade out, go for a walk, start digging some holes. Start with a worm count, just how many per shovel, right? Now that's your benchmark. Don't compare it to anyone else's unless it's really good, then tell everybody. Okay. I found one worm every 4 shovelfuls. Oh, this is not good, right? Why aren't they there? Let's consider this. What's missing in my cycle, whatever. Keep monitoring it. Okay, now I've got 2 in every shovelful. Okay, we're going forwards. This is great. When we get up to 10, that's great. Okay, we got 10. So that's 2.5 million worms per hectare. Wow, this is not bad. Now we're getting something moving. Right. So they're the things I'd say. Go and look. What do the roots look like? Is there any life in it? Is it looking good? Start thinking about that critically. Don't worry about soil tests and all that. They're going to tell you stuff. It's not don't do them, but your observations are worth far more for your direction of farming, in my opinion. Yeah. So, go and a critical thought and a spade take you a long way. So.
And what about, this is to both of you. You can both answer or just one of you. Okay, so I've decided that I'm going to try multi-species. What is the first thing that I need to do?
Set goals.
Okay.
Set goals. And what about specifically, okay, I've chosen the variety or the species. What do I need to do before I start planting?
The goal, the objective. What's your objective? I would say that. Okay, mostly here it's going to be grazing. We're going to graze it. So,
yeah.
I think be a bit realistic as well. So it might not come out like that picture behind Kev the first go. That's one thing we've been finding, Kevin. I'd love your thoughts on this, that maybe it's going to take a couple of goes. I've seen, there's something about season 3, right? Season 3 seems to be the one that things become self-organising. I've seen some great stuff. Russell and Roz that were at those field days. Year 1, I was like, oh, not sure about this, not looking good. Year 2, okay, yeah, this is looking all right. Year 3, off it goes. Never look back. But just don't. The fact, if it didn't fire up the way you wanted the first go, don't give up on it. Consider it. The other thing I'd say is don't spend $1 million on seeds. Just try something. We're great advocates of planting birdseed at $1.80 a kilo. Just try a little bit. Try some of the farm. You don't have to go fence to fence every single time. Try it. See what worked. What did work, and build on it and keep building on it once you start. That's my thoughts on today. Not having any more thoughts till tomorrow.
Okay.
Christine Jones said the same thing with Grant Sims when he tried sunflowers. The first year they grew this high and they died.
Yeah.
The next year they grew this high and they died. And the third year they were 2 meters high. And the neighbor said, "Oh, you found a variety that works." He said, "No, that was the same blend, same stock, seeded it, and we were priming the microbiome of the soil. Because if we haven't grown something, our microbiome is used to monocultures and low diversity. Now we throw lots of diversity on it. There could be a bit of a shock to the system."
Yeah. That was the basis of a whole field day that we had, Kev, that Tamzin came to in Dungog, was that thing about, people try it and give up. There's a photo of Cole Seiss and his mate in the very first oat pasture cropping they did. It's up to their waist, right? But they're sitting on their bums, right? So, by another measure, that might be seen as a failure. But same the Grant Sims example, they just keep building upon it, and that. So last time I spoke with Christine, it got reviewed. I said 3 seasons. She reviewed it to 3 multis in a row. So a summer, a winter, and a summer. We're away. It's okay, that's great. It sort of shortens that time frame again. So it's it across the board. The people that are having success with it, it didn't necessarily rage the first time. It's taken a couple of. And season 3, who knows why, but we're away. So don't give up on it.
And I'm pretty sure with that Grant Sims story as well, to go on to the next season, they had no rain or something, but he was still able to grow something because his neighbours commented, "Oh, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it?" And then that following season, he went, "Probably not a waste of time. Yeah, it well, what you would classify it as failing, but it's actually after that 4th season, it's fully successful."
Yeah, let's look. I guess consider the benefit beyond your actual this year's enterprise. That's something I don't think we do very much. And again, Chris is kind of my philosopher on this. He has some really fantastic insights in it. And he said, look, that massive multi, that's awesome. It's great. But what happens next is even more impressive. What that's prepared for the next season. I'm like, that's that follow on, the processionary consequence is as important as what you got grazing wise. There's no, that's not a finite point where you grazed it and this year I made this many dollars off that paddock or whatever. Consider all these next bits, the follow on from it. So that's I don't think we do that. We get stick your head in the spreadsheet and say, well, I made this much and I spent this much and so on. What's coming next that you've prepared for is really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's the bit that really needs to be challenged and supported. Once you have challenged it, then that bit of the whole thinking.
Yeah.
So people become subscription rather than prescription.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. If no one's got anything else to add, thank you everybody for watching. I know, I think we're getting better at this, Kevin, aren't we? And you'll all notice it once I put the series together, how we've improved, I reckon, which is good. We're going up. We're like multi-species. We're in like the 3rd season.
Season 3. We're away.
Thank you so much, Lee, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Kevin.
Likewise.
And
Love
Lee
what you're
will
doing.
also, I'm planning, we'll have a few discussions with Kirsty about this, but for the conferences that Lee will be present or hopefully product or something.
Do you know I've been sacked? Did you know I got the sack the other week?
You did tell me, but I think
fantastic.
it's sort of just been moved sideways a little bit.
No, I'm out. I'm hanging with the kids and fishing every day. It's terrific.
Okay, well, maybe you won't see Lee, but you'll see Kirsty then.
We'll send Ray.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everybody for watching.
Thanks.
Have a good Sunday.
See ya.